Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see so many friendly faces, so many new faces. Good to have people here from around the world, across the country. Um, I am wondering if we have chat access, if we can just put in the chat at the beginning here. We'll close it when Roshi begins her talk, but just where you're from, where you're zooming in from in the world, so we get a sense of the wide web that connects us all. Uh, wow. It's always a torrent, but if you zoom up, you can see people's responses. So we have Aaron from Toronto in Canada, and we have Deborah in Portland, Maine, and Jennifer in San Antonio, and Elena Falcone in New York, Iowa City, uh, someone in France, and Brazil, a number of people in Brazil. So you can just see we're all here together, and it's a way of saying hello, kind of say hello and where you're from, and remember that we come together in this Mahasangha uh, in a kind of broad and spacious way. And I'm on the road this week, and Roshi's at Upaya, and will be sharing with us today. And I really just want to start by remembering that we're in this continuous practice together, uh, facing the difficulty of the modern world, but also the joys and sorrows of our daily life, our lived experience, and turning toward again and again. And Kodo and I just had the joy, the opportunity to lead a young adult retreat, and we were reading just the basic teachings together. We were reading Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, and teaching from Suzuki Roshi's book. And he says in one of the chapters, related to the Eightfold Path, actually, that Roshi will be speaking to us about, that if we listen with an uncluttered mind, if we listen with our full being, and he says, with a pure mind, that the teachings are like things we are remembering, we already know and are recalling. And so we can listen today like that. And I want to express my appreciation to Roshi for continuing this kind of way of practice together, this big tent way of practice here and online. And we've just been through a number of ceremonies, and Roshi's just come from teaching haiku, and there's not a kind of moment in between. It's continuous practice being in the thread with her. So it's a real joy. And we all know you, Roshi, and her many books and many teachings, but really she's the steward of not just Upaya, the place, but kind of this broad way of practicing together. And for that, I'm very grateful, and I think we are all very grateful. So, Roshi, I hand it over to you. Thank you so much. Oh, you're on mute.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Kozan?
We can hear you now.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. When the pandemic hit, and most of us were in lockdown, Kozan and I and our community here conferred, and we just realized how deep the suffering across the planet was, and how we felt morally responsible, but inspired as well to actually create a big tent, as Kozan calls it, where we can come together as a community, Kalyana Mitra, as a community of kindness and also of social and environmental action. That the dispositiveness that young people have been facing in so many quarters, that elderly, that those pushed to the margins of society. And this morning, our last formal session in the haiku retreat was with Jimmy Santiago Baca, who spent many years in what's called the dungeon, in a prison, in solitary retreat, so to speak, teaching himself to read and write. And now his life is just exploding with generativity and opportunity. We are that in a way. We are on a planet, on an earth, in a place where we're at an inflection point, socially, environmentally, and psychologically. And so after we did this year during the pandemic of socially engaged Buddhism, Kozan and I decided we would do a second year, and that happened. Now we're into the third year, because I remember so clearly what Thai said to us. And Thai said, the coming Buddha is the Sangha. And when we say Sangha, we're not talking about cult or club. Although Bernie said, these Buddhist, church houses are like clubs. But in this case, I look at Sangha really as every being and thing, not separate from myself, from Upaya, from all of you, not separate from Israel and Gaza, not separate from Ukraine, not separate from the prison where Jimmy was incarcerated for years, not separate from the hospital bed that Laurel died in a week ago. We are in this thing together. And whether Jimmy wrote a book called You're Not My Enemy, we have to include our so-called enemies under this big roof, under this big tent. And on Upaya's homepage, when Hamas bombed Israel and when Israel responded, but actually I should have written this 2 years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. But there was so much polarization, and really understandably so, because wounds deeply exist on all sides of the equation of war. We put these words on our homepage, in a way as a kind of mindfulness bell. And I think Norman last week started off with these words, and I want to begin this session after Kozan's generous introduction with these words. Hatred is never appeased by hatred. This is Dhammapada 5. And these are the words that many of you have heard and read. Upaya Zen Center's global community finds itself grieving the tragic loss of life in Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, and 30 other wars, and now we can say genocides, raging on our planet at this moment. And we stand upright and open as we call not only for a ceasefire, but a ceasing of war in our time. Our hearts cannot turn away from the truth of pervasive suffering, sorrow, and death as a result of war. And for this, we urge that this be a time of deep dialogue, reaching past differences, of recognizing that the terrible cost of war passes through generations, that the impact of war on our earth is inestimable, and that we must realize our basic humanity and sanity for the sake of all at this time and those who are yet to be born. So I stand by these words, and I hope these words serve you in some small way. Now, I recently read an article in Tricycle by the Buddhist teacher John Peacock, and actually it was called The Elephant in the Room, and he made a really important point. And I want to bring it up as we begin this exploration of the 8 great realizations. Thich Nhat Hanh and his people teach this all the time. So I'm, standing on the shoulders of giants, but it's a teaching the 8 great realizations that I think are really important for our time. But I want to go to what John basically wrote in this article. And it's just, to me, right on. He says, if our quest for personal flourishing in this world, and you know what I say, this is parenthesis, I say, Buddhism, in the best sense of the word, is not a self-improvement program. It's a self-destruction program, small self. So if our personal quest for personal flourishing in this world through the study and practice of Buddhism doesn't lead us to question the structures that give rise to hunger, inequality, prejudice, and injustice, then our, quotes, Buddhism exists in a rarefied atmosphere divorced from the struggle for existence of billions of beings on this planet. I'm going to read that again, and I'll put the link into the resource page when we're finished this morning. I'm going to, one more time. If our quest for personal flourishing in this world through the study and practice of Buddhism doesn't lead us to question the structures that give rise to hunger, inequality, prejudice, and injustice, then our, quotes, Buddhism exists in a rarefied atmosphere divorced from the struggle for existence of billions of beings on this planet. So I just want to thank John Peacock. And this is why we're offering Gathering Dharma. It is not to avoid or bypass at all. In fact, it is to really touch the truth of the First Noble Truth, the truth of suffering and its roots. And then the good old number 3, that we can do this. This is inherently who we are, deeply who we are. And there is a path of transformation, the 4th truth. So we're sitting here as friends, as Kalyana Mitra, endeavoring to touch into not only our own basic humanity at this time, but also to look at those whom we consider to be reprehensible, to look at those whom we consider to be our enemies, those who are engaging in harm, and to also rehumanize them, as John Paul Lederach would say, to see if we can actualize a quality of inclusivity expressed through equanimity in our practice, in our lives, in our relationships with all beings and things. And, I am so grateful, excuse me, for Thich Nhat Hanh reinterpreting the word equanimity as inclusivity. I think this is a really important way to view equanimity. And I remember, some of you have heard me say this before, I heard Tara Tulku once say, equanimity is that capacity to care for or love all beings equally. Wow, that's an assignment, isn't it? So Gathering Dharma is a chance for us to connect. It's a chance for us to confirm our vows, particularly the vows of the bodhisattvas, and also to not turn away from the truth of suffering, but to understand, in a way, the imperative right now is to work in our lives, to open our lives to the great endeavor of transforming suffering, both personally and also as John Peacock and the Buddha and I and Joanna Macy and Alan Senaki and so many socially engaged Buddhists and beloved Kozan and Kodo and our community here to transform violence institutionally in our world. So what we have been hoping to foster through this endeavor of meeting, now this is our third year, is not to foster a cult separate from the anguish of the world, but literally a community of contemplative activists. Thank you, Daniel Berrigan, and all those friends who have worked with Daniel Berrigan in that spirit, or Joanna Macy and so many. And also to cultivate an endeavor that is relational, where we understand the profound value of being able to be deeply grounded in a groundless world and to see clearly in the midst of confusion, and to develop a kind of fierce but loving, ethically committed path to action, transformative action in the world. So I'm going to ask us for just a few minutes, if you will. By the way, I'm speaking slowly so our Portuguese translators can keep up. Sometimes we're just spinning quickly, but I want us to have the opportunities for our translators to catch up. I'm going to ask us, for our sake, if you would, in the chat, just put one word and, how are you? How are you really? How are you doing? And we will just grateful, deeply moved, heart sore, indeed, drained, grieving, hopeful, hurting, nervous, heart sore, cracked open, here, grieving, healing, grateful, heartbroken, confused, disturbed, exhausted, sad, so much grief. Tara, holding steady. Shelley, samsaric. Pam, tired. It's just so many, so much learning. I am not your enemy. Committed, troubled, unmoored, grounded, challenged. So much grief in this community, so much weariness, willing. And Ashley, thank you for saying worried. Me too. Tenderhearted. Miranda, poised. Carol, at the edge. Deeply suffering. And I encourage all of us to just move through this list to get a sense, as I'm doing. We have, many. Breathing, spring rawness, and Charmaine, sadness for the world wars. Hopeful, discouraged, exhausted, precarious, overwhelmed, holding poignancy. Inspired. Thank you. We're going now actually to turn the chat off for just a little bit, and we'll turn the chat back on so we can kind of stay with each other. Part of this practice is to become transparent to each other, just as you have done by putting where you're at into the chats. So, I feel you, but I feel a little bit more close to you because much of what you have put in the chat really reminds me of the whole suite of emotions, feelings, stirrings that I experience every day. And I want to invite us, since we've brought so much feeling to the foreground, to just take some moments of practice together, if that's okay. And I invite us to find a seat that is comfortable. And, in the way that we do here at Upaya, allowing your attention to move into the sensation of your sits bones on your chair or your feet on your floor. And invite yourself to be grounded in this groundless world. And even if the chest feels tight, I ask you to allow yourself to take a deep in-breath. And let your attention rest on that in-breath and an exhale with your attention on the out-breath. And having settled a little bit into your body, take a moment to remember why we're here. What I was saying earlier is just, and goes on. We want to bring the best to an aching world, knowing we cannot control outcomes, but we show up. And maybe bring to mind a situation where with someone, or the pictures in Israel and Gaza or Ukraine, just, she wants some juice. You want your equanimity to have juice in it, caring, because equanimity is made of kindness, compassion, and joy in the well-being of others. So it's really touching that experience of suffering of another, or maybe it is you, where you actually feel some kind of shift in your body, heart, and mind. Subtle, not necessarily big. And if you feel kind of distant, that too is a kind of suffering. So you can just notice that too. And breath deep in the body. I'm going to invite you now to let this sensibility of care move into the background of your awareness, and to consider how rare and precious this human life is. Knowing that in the course of your life, you've encountered many difficulties if you're human. And you've also encountered some benefit or blessing. If you're in this country, maybe you feel safe, but not everyone in this country feels safe. Maybe you had food to eat this morning, but not everyone in your country or this country had food to eat. So for a moment, just recognize this human life is precious, and can you appreciate, much as we heard my old friend Jimmy Santiago Baca, finding beauty in the midst of the hell of incarceration. Look for not only the truth of suffering, but that which resources you so you can recall how rare and precious this human life is. These minutes, these days, these years that you have in order to bring your best, in order to benefit others. It's truly a gift beyond comparison. So I ask you just to take a few breaths to consider the gift of this life that you have received. And if just a little flash of gratefulness arises, let it shine on you. And breath deep in the body. Now I ask you, just with this human body, be aware that it is impermanent. I feel it deeply as an elder, but so many are perishing at this time. All will perish. Everything in the phenomenal world will change, and one day, sooner or later, will cease to exist. So please contemplate this truth, the truth of impermanence and of your mortality at this time. And breath deep in the body. And touching the truth of impermanence. By the way, impermanence is not all bad. But also, neither is our mortality all bad. I can't imagine living forever in a certain way. But, Tai says a cloud never dies. But I think it's very important for us to actually sit with the truth of suffering, of old age, of sickness, of death, of birth, of getting what you don't want, that diagnosis, the increase in rent, or not getting what you want, or losing that which really is important to you. And know that really no one escapes pain. This is just kind of the basic condition of our lives. Let yourself open to the truth of suffering, and also how, in a certain way, your thinking and my thinking, how our society is organized, contributes to suffering for all species. And let yourself be with life at this very moment and accept and learn from all of it. And remember, our actions in the world matter. The impact of our thoughts, of our words, of our actions. They are consequential. Truly, so much depends on how we conduct ourselves and sit in the truth of cause and effect, of consequentiality. You matter. Your actions matter. Your words matter. Your thoughts matter. And that's why we're here today. So let the breath be deep in the body, contemplating the preciousness of this human life. It's hard to get one of these things, they say. Impermanence prevails. Suffering is present, and there are consequences for how we live. Thus, I thank you for being here as we sit with this contemplation. So I want to share with you that in the past few weeks, I have really been struggling. I've been struggling over this horrid, tragic loss of life in Ukraine and Israel and Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, and so many other world quarters. And there have been moments when I have felt quite crushed. But when I learned of Navalny's death, his murder, and read his words, you are not allowed to give up. So no matter what the complexities in the background of his history are, still he was a voice of resistance in a totalitarian political situation. And those words just struck me so deeply, because there are times when I just would like to give up. Now, I think it's important to give up a whole bunch of things, but not the give up that Navalny was talking about. You know, what is it to show up in the midst of suffering? And I said after Jimmy talked this morning, bodhisattvas do not seek easy situations. And this, I think, is really important for us to understand, that the difficulties that we encounter as humans, as practitioners, as caregivers, as social activists, it is not to reject the difficulty, but it is to see how the difficulty can actually influence our own character, not to degrade it, but to actually strengthen it. And this is the path of the bodhisattvas. We can ask, what do we mean if maybe not all of us are Mahayana bodhisattva understanding people, but you're all bodhisattvas or aspiring ones. You can ask, what is a bodhisattva? And, just traditionally we say, this being this person or the archetype of the bodhisattva who is one who is on a path to awakening and has dedicated their life to the welfare of beings in all realms and who works tirelessly for the ending of suffering. And I kind of like the word tirelessly, which is in some of the commentaries, because you can get pretty pathologically altruistic, that is pretty tired from being in service to the world. But my old friend Norman Fisher, who started this series, has written about the cultivation of the bodhisattva attitude. And us sitting with the question, how can we, or how can I, how can you transform suffering? What can you do? What can I do? And how can we, instead of nourishing or feeding futility, cynicism, or radical disengagement, how can we nourish wise hope in our time? And Norman has written, it's such a beautiful insight. He says, there are two strands that are really essential. And one has to do with manifesting the attitude of a bodhisattva. And the other is through the medium of imagination. And so when Norman uses this term, bodhisattva's attitude, he's talking about cultivating a fundamental climate of generosity and appreciation. I remember Glassman Roshi, when we were working on the Peacemaker precepts, one of the precepts in the Peacemaker order is, do not cultivate a mind of poverty in yourself or others. And on one hand, it's kind of interesting that there has been some kind of virtue signaling or social merit associated with complaining, finding everything wrong, or this sort of catastrophic perspective. But Norman points toward this bodhisattva attitude, and we point toward it here, about generating a fundamental climate of generosity and appreciation, of opening ourselves to not just fixating on the catastrophe that we're in right now with our climate, or the threat of a world war with what is going on in the Mideast and Ukraine. And to understand that this attitude or climate of generosity that we're endeavoring to develop, and this comes right out of the paramitas, the reflections, or the paramitas, the first one being dana paramita, generosity. It's a reflection on our character and of our character. It's our very stance. It's our point of view. It's the internal atmosphere that colors our way of seeing the world, of seeing reality. And going back to what Jimmy was saying this morning, who, as I said, taught himself to read in solitary confinement in a prison in Arizona. One of the most powerful poems I've read was written by Jimmy, who in the midst of the hell of incarceration found beauty. And I'll see if I can find that poem for you. But I'll put it on the resource page too. And then Norman is talking about imagination. I think this is very important, that it's to understand everything is subject to change. And all possibilities are possible. The best and the worst. But honestly, I remember when, and I cite this often, when the Berlin Wall came down, or the war more or less ended in Vietnam earlier, or same-sex marriage was sanctioned. So many things that I thought I would never see in my lifetime. And it requires imagination to actually allow ourselves. It's kind of a field of possibility that we cultivate in our practice, in our lives, in our relationship. And also to know that bodhisattvas don't always seek quick solutions. Although for me, that coming down of the Berlin Wall, as I said, never in my lifetime, and it happened. So in this regard, I received the galley for Pico Ayer's new, but it's not published, it's a new book. He was on with us last night from Nara. Such a beautiful writer and human being. And the book is called A Flame, and the book opens up with this story from Pico. And I want to share it because so I hear so often the call of despair, and it is not for us to turn away from the feeling of being crushed or feeling cynical or angry, but it is actually to turn toward it and say, what are you teaching me here? What is the treasure in the midst of this mud? So this is what Pico has written, and I want to share it with you because it uplifted me so much. He says, two men in white robes stand at the end of the road, high above the empty highway. Quotes, "That fire last October," says one, young and slim, his eyes burning under his shaven head, "it came within 3 miles of us. At one point, our road got blocked and there was no way out." And then the young guy says, "It was radiant." Pico writes, his older monastic brother says nothing. Quotes, "For 3 days and nights," Cyprian goes on, "the sky was black, like sooty fog all the time. I went down to the last bench on the road, and the whole ocean was blood red. Plumes of smoke were rising from the hills. I heard trees exploding. It was incandescent." Pico writes, "I don't know what to say. Fire has already left its mark on me." And he told the story last night of this catastrophic fire years ago in Santa Barbara that burned his family's house down and 8 years of work, of writing work, just to ashes. And Pico says to Cyprian, "You pay for your blessings, I venture at last." Quotes, "We do," says the other, burly with gentle eyes. "A lot of people don't understand that. They see only the beauty." Pico continues, "The beauty, of course, is hard to miss. In the distance, headlands that stretch toward the cities to the south, surf scrubbing white around their edges. To our right, a whole expanse of ocean with not a thing to interrupt the blue. A deep valley to our left and dry golden hills from which mountain lions sometimes emerge for their prey. 900 acres of live oak, madrona, redwood, and desert yucca, a quarter of a mile above the sea." Then Pico says, "I wonder if beauty always has to carry a trace of mortality." I try, and my two friends are wise enough not to say a word, looking out over the charred hills to the promise all around. I read that and I thought immediately of my good friend Joanna Macy and her work in active hope. You know, so many of you as social and environmental activists working on an intimate scale, just turning off the lights for gosh sake, or on a big scale. Sometimes we just see through the lens of the problem only and not the possibility. Sometimes our imagination has been eclipsed by weariness. And I think this is why what my good friend Rebecca Solnit, in her incredible writings on hope, Joanna Macy, myself writing on hope, also Pico on hope. So I invite us to take a breath and ask yourself internally, what, my friends, what's alive in you right now? And again, being economical, I invite you to just put a few words in the chat, please. Thank you. Breath, endurance, possibility, friendship, nature, justice, hope, good, hopeful, curiosity, resilience, perseverance, warmth, possibility, finding the path, tenderness, fellow travelers. Who am I? If there's absence, the ground for new has been tilled. Beautiful. Tenderness. Thank you. Togetherness. Love. Don't give up. Don't give up. So thank you for that. Now, back to this aspiring bodhisattvaness. You know, after every evening sit, and we chanted in many other situations, we chant the 4 vows, which are just impossible assignments. So it's impossible now to deal with this world. The problems are so big. But in a way, this amazing 4 vows, which mirrors the 4 Noble Truths, which were, these 4 vows were crafted in early China by the founder of the Tendai school, Qi Yi. And I just want us, because we'll touch into them again at the end of our time together, but just the impossibility of these vows. And that first one being creations are numberless. I vow to free them. So often, you know, we're referring in this, or we associate with this first vow, you know, the people at the border trying to find their way to freedom and nonviolence and being stopped. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Those in prison, those who are dying, those in war zones, children who have been abused, men and women who've been abused, and so forth. But this vow also refers to the creations of our own mind. Creations are numberless. Boy, how many thoughts have you had as you've moved through the few words that I've shared in this time? Creations are numberless. Free them all. Free them all. It becomes a kind of attitude that we bring to how we are in the world. Creations are numberless. You know, it's an impossible task. but we show up. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. So many traps that the ego and society, the institutions within our society, have created. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Actually, many of you know this. The proper translation is I vow to put an end to them. But when I talked to Bernie when we were working on these vows, and the group of us who were working together, I said, it's not a matter of stopping. It's really a matter of touching the truth of suffering and then committing to transform that suffering. As Tai said, no mud, no lotus. And then reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. And this comes back, to this bodhisattva attitude of cultivating an atmosphere of generosity. Reality is boundless. It's not just emptiness per se or boundlessness per se, but the possibilities also are boundless. Reality is boundless. Our interconnectedness, interbeing, boundless. I vow to perceive it. And so often we're moving as people who are socially and environmentally engaged out of a sense of poverty or not enough or insufficiency. And in a way, we're in this trap of the capitalistic system, feeling insufficient to the task. Whereas Tai and Kaz Tanahashi would talk about the miracle of this present moment. This is it. This is where our work is. And then that fourth vow, the awakened way, is, let's see, what is it now? I can't believe I chant these every day. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is, somebody help me now. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. I vow to embody it. This is through our lived experience that we do this. It's not an abstract, it's not a concept. It is in our actual moment-to-moment life that we do it, walking out of the room, turning off the lights, connecting warm hand to warm hand, coming alongside the suffering of others, being aware of our own situation and practicing good self-stewardship. So years ago, in this bodhisattva attitude, when I met Thich Nhat Hanh in the mid-60s in New York, and then became his formal student in the mid-80s and went to Plum Village. It was really very few people were there. There was an upper hamlet and lower hamlet. Wonderful Vietnamese family lived in the lower hamlet. In the upper hamlet, Thai lived with Sister Chong Kong, and a few other Vietnamese people were there. And one of the things that Thai asked that we study deeply as the Plum Village Sangha began to grow was this very powerful teaching that is not only for monks and nuns, but also for lay people, and also so important for people who are engaged in social justice and environmental justice. And he produced, first in Vietnamese and then in English, and Parallax Press published this short text on the eight realizations of great beings. And apparently this was a teaching that was translated by An Shikao in China in the latter part of the Han Dynasty, around 140 to 170, 180, somewhere in there. And the sutra is called the Asta Mahasatcha Sutra. And these 8 realizations, the first 4 are basically practices that are about individual, if you will, awakening. And then the last 4 is, how we take our awakening and manifest it in a world to deeply benefit others. And the 8 realizations, they are seen, if you will, through the eyes of a bodhisattva, understanding that there are so many difficulties that we humans and our institutions are subject to and create for others. And also there are just sort of boundless opportunities for us to become wiser and to become a little bit more compassionate. And so this first liberation was referenced. I did the 4 reminders in our meditation. And the first one is how important it is for us to recognize the truth of impermanence. We want so much to fix things in time and space, to have this sense of solidity, to have reference points that give our ego a sense of safety and security. But that isn't how things really are. And so in this first realization, and what is important is realization. It's letting it be real for ourselves. This is not just ideas. It's like in the context of practice, or coming alongside a dying person, or coming alongside a man on death row, or coming alongside someone who is unsheltered. Like the man who showed up at the dedication on Wednesday who said, "I'm a homeless person," he said to me. Understand through your lived experience the truth of impermanence. It is essential. It is one of the most important teachings of the Buddha. It really allows for the unfolding or for the arising of the experience of wise hope. And the second aspect that, again, goes back right to the core of and very foundation of the teaching of the Buddha is the actualization or understanding, interbeing, that we are not separate from any being or thing. Even if we say that person is the worst. And, I have those moments. Oh, my goodness. So it is. Thoughts that are really critical arise within me. And then I realize I'm not separate from that person, that situation. So realizing both impermanence and the truth of suffering, and also the experience of fundamental interbeing through, again, our lived experience, not as a concept, but through our direct experience. Just take a moment, please. Allow yourself just to touch into whatever is present for you in this moment. Contemplate it and see if you can look beneath the ego's tendency to want to fixate in time and space to create something solid. And allow yourself to just feel the kind of slipperiness, the transitoriness, the impermanence of all things. And I just want to say, it's again sitting with my good friend Laurel, who died a week ago. This was the co-founder of our prison project here at Upaya many, many years ago. As Wendy and I were sitting in the neuro ICU, I wanted her to live, but also I knew all outcomes were there before us. And of course, the outcome of her mortality was actually the card that was played. Her life ended. The truth of impermanence. The truth of impermanence. And also the absence of a separate self-identity. So this second realization is a very interesting one. It is, having few desires. And again, I go back to do not cultivate a mind of poverty in yourself and others. And to realize that, grasping the extractive kind of just below the surface capitalistic psyches that are bred into many of us in Western culture. We have to decondition ourselves from that. See if we can simplify. And then in the text, it says, those with little desire and ambition are able to relax. Their body and mind are free from entanglement. So take just a few moments and sit with this perspective. What does it mean to have few desires? And it's interesting. I have one desire that's in the foreground, but I'm not sure I'm always clear about in the background desires. But that desire is to be of benefit of others, to others. So that I like to say no desires, few desires, having few desires. What is the really important aspiration? Another car? Maybe not. Ending suffering? Maybe so. And then this third realization is very interesting because in a way it's saying to us, get off the hedonic treadmill. That is to say, very much in the vein of the second realization, but it's, we're always looking for something better, a better teacher, a better practice, a better pair of shoes, a better house, and so forth. And this sense of dissatisfaction that underlies everything. And it also appears in our world as social and environmentally engaged people, that things are really so bad. And, we're looking for something that's better instead of turning toward the truth. And I love this phrase from Zen Master Keizan in his Denkaroku: do not find fault with the present. Which always goes, wait a minute, there's a lot that's bad in the present. But what Keizan is saying is, no, don't judge the present. See deeply the present. And then out of that, a wholesome or sane response arises. So contemplate this, please. Then the fourth is wholeheartedness. What is it to be, deeply and sort of engaged with your whole being? And that's a little bit my MO, by the way. I'm sure most of you who know me well know that to be true. I think maybe the other realizations I might not be so good at, but this fourth realization is just saying, it's really dangerous to be slothful, to be lazy, And I've often, in the past few months, evoked the term appamada, which is heedfulness or vigilance, but also conscientiousness and care. How important it is for us to bring this kind of bright awareness, clear awareness to what is happening in the present moment, and neither avoid, bypass, or be lazy in relation to how we encounter the truth of suffering. So those are the four first ones. And then the next four are focused on how we actually support others in bringing forth their own basic goodness. And we have a Gatha, and we often use Thay's translation of the Gatha. The Dharma is vast and subtle. We now have a chance to hear it, study it, and contemplate it, and to incorporate it into our lives, directly. So that's the little Gatha version of it, anyway, of what we chant before our Dharma talks. And it is, we serve others by actualizing the wisdom of listening deeply, of contemplating deeply what one is hearing, both internally and also from others, and of bringing that understanding into our lived experience in service to others. And I know, again, I often say, I've learned so much from teachers like Frank Ostaseski and Bernie and His Holiness Dalai Lama and Thich Nhat Hanh, so wonderful. But really, what I have learned from people who are dying that I have come alongside, or the men I worked with in the prison system, or sitting in Doksan with young people, listening deeply and endeavoring to incorporate what I have learned from others into my life. Then the sixth is the practice of fundamental generosity. Going back to do not cultivate a mind of poverty in yourself or other, knowing that the sense of poverty, whether it's material poverty or I'm not good enough, actually breeds anguish and anger. And that the cultivation of fundamental generosity, this bodhisattva attitude of generosity toward others and toward our own situation, and caring for all beings, friend and enemy alike, equally. This is this cultivation of a mind of generosity, this bodhisattva attitude of generosity. So this sixth realization, cultivating this, an attitude, a kind of spirit of generosity in our lives. Then the seventh realization, understanding that this practice that we're doing, connecting directly with what is before us, cultivating a mind that is stable and inclusive, is a way for one not to be harmed. And so often we personalize, when a grieving mother turns her anger on a caregiver like myself, and not personalizing it, but feeling connected to it, but not being harmed by it, but holding it, coming alongside, being open to it, including it. So the seventh realization is, we are cultivating this stability of body, heart, and mind, so that, and not engaging in things that are really disturbing us. And I remember, from one of our Chinese ancestors, there's only one precept, and that is, do not disturb the mind. So although we are in the world, we are coming alongside, we are in this catastrophe, we also try not to be dragged down, but to use our imagination in order to move in such a way to include both the truth of suffering and the possibility of transforming suffering. And then the eighth realization, well, that is the vow to benefit all beings. We know that the fires of birth and death, of suffering, of ignorance are in us and all around us, but we take vows. And in part, these vows are what I am hoping we as a community will return to as we are with each other through this gathering Dharma over the months ahead. The essential thing in community of how we choose to live by vow. So I want to just finish this talk, and then we'll open up for reflections with a poem by James Cruz. Knowing that these 8 great realizations are practices, just like the 4 reminders are practices that actually are not about adding something to our lives, but of opening up our lives to who we really are. And as I said, bodhisattvas do not seek easy situations. And this poem at the end of my talk, I hope, reflects this. And the poem is called Kintsugi Again. In the Japanese art of mending ceramic with powdered gold, no one ever talks about how they leave the pots, cups, and cracked bowls broken for a while, sometimes whole generations. And so I say to you, let your heart stay shattered in your chest. Let it ache. Some might claim you've now been broken open and can let the light in. This might be true, but before you rush to gloss over the wounds, filling the holes with gold so they glimmer, try to find beauty in the broken places too, proof of where the fire left its marks on you. Which takes us back to this beautiful piece that Pico shared in A Flame, his new book. So friends, I'd like to open our community for some reflections. I just ask you to kindly raise your hand and we'll go to essence as we come alongside and bear witness to each other. And Lorraine, it's so great to see you. Boy, one of my favorite haiku poets. She really stirs in the suffering of the world and writes amazing haiku based on her experience and her wisdom. Lorraine, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Roshi. It's just an honor to share this space with you. Your words are so powerful and they are so nurturing. And I'm just so grateful to have had the chance to receive your wisdom and the wisdom of everybody in this huge Sangha. It's really pretty incredible. And why what you shared with us and what you're offering is so important, is I find myself in a place of despair pretty often. And to me, it's a slippery slope into these feelings of, I'm just one person. What can I possibly do? What does my poetry really have to do with anything? It's not feeding a homeless person on the curb, right? And it breeds this sense of inactivity. And this is just such a lovely, gentle nudge to find a center, find some balance, and put on the capital B Bodhisattva.
Right on. I love what you said. I actually told a little story in the haiku retreat, and some of you I know have heard it before, but I was walking in Plum Village, and Ty was in his mustard green garden weeding, and he stood up and we greeted each other, and then he said something like, I couldn't do what I do if I didn't, or write the poetry that I write if I didn't take care of the mustard greens. So, I think we sometimes feel that, for example, if you're an artist, and you're painting like you are writing, Jimmy is writing, so many of the people who gathered this past week, just is really remarkable. Jane, Hirschfield, and Pico, and boy, we had a kind of big crowd. We're going to make the faculty a little smaller. We hardly had time for anything, any writing, but we collected thousands of haiku in our haiku treasure house. But I think what Ty was so committed to was having understanding the value of being an artist, as you are, and how that inspires others. It's because your poetry, your haiku, and the way you comport yourself in the world actually has so much authenticity. It just brings that sensibility of the importance. People are touched by your words. I was deeply touched by your book and by, the teachings last year in the haiku program. So please, if you're an artist, keep being an artist, right? We need the artists more than many people realize. And I just thank you. And somebody just quoted Alexei Navalny. Oh gosh, let's see. Oh, here. It is not shameful to do something small. It is shameful to do nothing. Thank you, Regina, for sharing his words. And, a lot of us think we have to mount these huge honking projects, and change the whole world. Well, I mean, John Paul Lederach, again, a lot of you have hung with me before, so he talks about the long peace. He's been working in Colombia for 40 years. The peace treaties get made, they get broken, you show up again, and you just do it. It takes imagination to persist, to show up. So even, if you're doing a big thing like a peace accord, but you're sharing your sandwich or cup of coffee with an unsheltered person on the corner, or you're turning off the lights when you leave the room, small acts are consequential. Please know that. And thank you. So great to see you again. GB, I'm unmuting you. Hi.
Hello, hello. It was so wonderful, Roshi. Thank you, thank you. You're talking about cultivating a stable mind. It's so hard to divorce myself from my thoughts. Recently, I've taken a slightly different tact, and this came out, and it's been very helpful, so I just pass it on. Do my thoughts have me? Do they wonder where I come from and where I go? Does my presence disturb them, distracting them from their search for awakening to their true nature? How might I serve my thoughts in such a way as to support their awakening?
So I love it, GB. And one of our things in our little Zen thing, we always have these cute little things we say. So we say, do not believe your thoughts. What I say, no, I'm not going to let my mental real estate be occupied by my flash of cynicism or despair. I'm actually, like Lorraine said, I'm going to ask despair, what are you teaching me? When I felt very crushed, my half brother died last month, and Laurel died, various other friends. It's like, wow, thank you. And someone said, Maya, check out Zenju Osho's Opening to Darkness. And just like the Kintsugi poem by James Cruz, let the brokenness sit for a while. It's not like just, I'm going to have a margarita, get rid of it. Don't do that. Don't bypass. Don't go to your addictions. Let the brokenness sit for a while and see what it's teaching you. And then the beauty of the landscape can be revealed. Yes, GB.
Well, I feel a little more friendly towards my thoughts, and don't feel so hooked in automatically each time I think of that and read that to myself again. How do I serve my thoughts?
Yeah.
Thank you, Roshi.
I'd love you to send that to me so we can put it on the resource page, GB. Thank you so much. And we have just a little bit more time, so we're going to slightly go to essence. Kirsten, you are unmuted. I unmuted you and then you disappeared. Oh, there you are. Karsten, I'm unmute. Oops. I'm going to unmute you. Wait a minute. There you are. You are unmuted, Karsten. Hi.
And you can now hear me. Yes. Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can.
Very good. First of all, this was just such a moving talk. So thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my dilemma. It's about feeling interconnected to everyone. I feel very interconnected to people in Russia. I know some of them personally. I know some of them who are in jail. I know some of them who felt they have to leave very quickly for fear of what could happen. I know Thich Nhat Hanh's wonderful poem, and I know I should feel connected to Putin, but there is just no way I can make that real. I can say those words to myself, but it's not in my heart.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, and I'm not even sure I want to.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Karsten, I can relate. So I'm hardly a perfect bodhisattva, but I've said this before, and forgive me for repeating for those of you who know me well. If you do perspective taking, Karsten, with Putin, which is to say, look out through his eyes, and you actually begin to get a sense of someone in that state of mind, that too is suffering. And then what connects you is compassion, which is, I'm not talking about floofly, pity or sympathy. It's actually recognizing the truth of that kind of suffering. We see it all over our politics in this country and Europe, Africa, the Americas, Canada. It's so hard for us to identify, so we move into polarization and blame until we move out of the Christian, Judeo-Christian, good-evil paradigm and move into that is suffering and what is not suffering. And the Judeo-Christian thing has, I think, messed a lot of us up. so that we can't really understand, with the kind of grandmother's heart or deep wisdom, those who are perpetrating horrible suffering on others, or even minor suffering on others, that the state of mind of those individuals is one of suffering. So we can identify with, the suffering of a dying person, or the suffering of, say, an unsheltered person, or of a child who's ill. That's very easy. But it's very difficult when the person is doing stuff that is really horrible and harmful. But that state of mind is suffering. And what when Thich Nhat Hanh is saying to us, that also is within us. And our work is mud to lotus work, of transforming. We've made that commitment. And that commitment is something that we're trying, through the medium of this Gathering Dharma, is to, spread among ourselves in this community, this world community here. Because your aversion toward Putin will not solve the problem.
Mhm.
Does that make sense, Karsten?
Does make sense. And I could tell myself, even before I asked the question, that it made sense, but I don't feel it.
I understand. There are times when I definitely don't feel it either, but less and less as I age, because I actually don't like the feeling of hating another, or feeling fearful or averse toward another. That's suffering for me.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So, friends, oh yeah, Ashley said another helpful teacher on this topic of forgiveness of this flavor is our beloved Frank Ostaseski. So, friends, we're just coming toward the end of our session, and I want to thank you so much for showing up, and just to know that we're doing this once a month, and Kozan and I will be online with the amazing teachers who are stepping into this. And our next teacher is Rhonda Fleming, Rhonda McGee. So that's really, I want us to build community here and talk with each other and learn from each other. And in this regard, I just ask you to donate generously if you can. If you can't, that's also just perfect. I personally do not take the donations, but it goes back into thanking the people under the hood of this place, and that's Joanne, Noah, Bonnie, Lulu, Wendy, this whole host of bodhisattvas who keep Upaya unfolding in the way that it is as we move into this post-pandemic phase and are slowly receiving people into the actual programs here. So I want to just close by saying the 4 bodhisattva vows, and if you know them, you can join me. We won't unmute everyone, but because it'll sound chaotic, but just so we keep coming back to these. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for whatever you do in the world to benefit beings. And stay the course, please, and live by vow. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kozan, Noah. Bye-bye.